Welcome back. Today, we're diving into summary of Autobiography of a Yogi. But let me tell you, this is no ordinary book. It's a spiritual treasure. If you're someone who's searching for truth, purpose, or deeper meaning in life, listening this is like stepping into an incredible adventure. Paramahansa Yogananda was the first yoga master from India to make the West his home. Back in the 1920s, he traveled across the U.S. on what he called his spiritual campaigns, drawing huge, enthusiastic crowds. Imagine packing some of the biggest halls in America with people eager to hear about spirituality. His initial impact was mind-blowing, but what's even more remarkable is the lasting influence of his work. Since it was first published in 1946, Autobiography of a Yogi has sparked a spiritual revolution that continues to inspire millions today. What makes this book so special? Well, it's not every day you get a first-hand account of the life of a sage like Yogananda. He shares his childhood revelations, encounters with saints and masters across India, the intense training he went through at his guru's ashram, and even the once secret teachings of self-realization. No matter your spiritual background, this book has been recognized as a true masterpiece. But don't think it's all heavy and serious. Yogananda's writing is filled with humor, lively stories, and practical wisdom. It's as enlightening as it is enjoyable to read. So, if you're ready for an adventure into the deeper mysteries of life, Autobiography of a Yogi might just be the book you're looking for. Chapter 1. My Parents and Early Life. In the opening chapter of Autobiography of a Yogi, Paramahansa Yogananda reflects on his early life and family background. He was born into a devout and spiritually inclined Bengali family in Gorakhpur, India, in 1893. His father, Bhagabati Charan Ghosh, worked for the Bengal-Nagpur Railway, which required frequent relocations. Despite his professional success, Yogananda's father remained deeply spiritual, and his mother, Gyanprabha Devi, was known for her kindness and religious dedication. Both parents had a significant impact on shaping Yogananda's spiritual mindset from a young age. Yogananda recalls how, as a child, he was drawn to spirituality and showed early signs of being a seeker. He had little interest in ordinary pursuits, but was deeply fascinated by saints and their divine experiences. He often experienced divine yearnings and was unusually preoccupied with thoughts of God and self-realization. Yogananda's mother nurtured his spiritual leanings, and she had a great influence on him until her untimely death, which he describes as a profound loss that shaped his life's spiritual quest. A significant anecdote in this chapter is about a holy amulet that his mother had received from a Swami, which was meant to protect Yogananda on his spiritual journey. However, the amulet disappeared at a later stage in his life, symbolizing that his spiritual awakening and search for truth were to unfold without material or external crutches. Chapter 2. My Mother's Death and the Mystic Amulet. Chapter 2 delves into a particularly poignant and transformative event in Yogananda's early life, the death of his mother. This event marked a turning point in his spiritual journey. The chapter begins by recounting the serene yet mystical circumstances surrounding her death. She had always nurtured Yogananda's spiritual inclinations, and her passing was a devastating, emotional blow to him. Before she died, she had been given the holy amulet by a Swami, which she entrusted to Yogananda, instructing him to safeguard it. The amulet, which symbolized divine protection and blessings, was believed to help him on his spiritual journey. Yogananda wore it faithfully, considering it a physical manifestation of his spiritual connection to his mother and the divine. However, one day, the amulet mysteriously disappeared. This event was deeply significant for Yogananda, who came to realize that the disappearance of the amulet was symbolic of the fact that his spiritual journey was to be carried out without external aid or protection. It signified that the only true guidance and protection would come from within, through his inner connection to God and the spiritual wisdom imparted by his teachers. This chapter foreshadows Yogananda's future search for spiritual enlightenment and his lifelong dedication to a higher purpose. His mother's death and the loss of the amulet represented both an emotional and spiritual challenge that deepened his commitment to his quest for truth and self-realization. In these chapters, Yogananda sets the tone for his life's journey, highlighting the deep influence of his family, early spiritual experiences, and the mystical nature of his calling to pursue a life dedicated to divine realization. Chapter 3. The Saint with Two Bodies. In Chapter 3 of Autobiography of a Yogi, Paramahansa Yogananda recounts a fascinating encounter with a spiritually advanced yogi named Swami Pranabananda, known for his ability to appear in two places at once, a phenomenon called bilocation. Swami Pranabananda was a close disciple of Lahiri Mahasaya, Yogananda's future guru, and was also a friend of Yogananda's father. This chapter highlights Yogananda's early exposure to miraculous spiritual powers and deepens his conviction about the existence of higher spiritual truths. Yogananda begins the chapter by explaining his fascination with saints and yogis who exhibit miraculous powers, often referred to as siddhis in yogic philosophy. One day, Yogananda's father instructs him to deliver a message to Swami Pranabananda. Upon arrival at the Swami's house, Yogananda meets a serene and gentle man who reveals that he already knows about Yogananda's visit before he even speaks. The most astonishing part of the chapter occurs when Swami Pranabananda, while sitting in front of Yogananda, mentions that he will simultaneously appear at Yogananda's father's office. When Yogananda later confirms this with his father, he learns that Swami Pranabananda had indeed appeared at the office at the exact same time he was with Yogananda. This miraculous occurrence leaves a deep impression on Yogananda, reinforcing his belief in the extraordinary spiritual powers attained by advanced yogis. The Swami's ability to bilocate is presented as a byproduct of his intense spiritual practice, devotion to his guru Lahiri Mahasaya, and his mastery of yogic techniques. Chapter 4. My Interrupted Flight Toward the Himalayas. In Chapter 4, Yogananda describes a youthful episode in which his burning desire for spiritual enlightenment leads him to attempt a journey to the Himalayas, which are traditionally seen as a sanctuary for yogis and saints. Yogananda, along with his friend Jitendra, makes plans to leave home and travel to the Himalayas to find spiritual masters who can guide him on his quest for God realization. Yogananda's eagerness to embark on this pilgrimage is motivated by his growing dissatisfaction with worldly life. His spiritual yearning pushes him to seek solitude and enlightenment in the Himalayan mountains, away from the distractions of everyday existence. He convinces his friend Jitendra to join him, and together they set off for the city of Benares, now Varanasi, which was a famous spiritual center in India. However, their plans are unexpectedly interrupted. Yogananda's older brother, Ananta, discovers their escape plan and catches up with them before they can continue their journey. Ananta reprimands Yogananda for his impulsiveness and persuades him to return home, emphasizing the responsibilities he has toward his family and his education. Though initially disappointed, Yogananda agrees to return, understanding that his spiritual journey will unfold in its own time. This chapter illustrates the youthful enthusiasm and idealism Yogananda had for the spiritual life, as well as the challenges and setbacks he faced along the way. It also reveals the balance between worldly duties and spiritual aspirations, a theme that would resonate throughout Yogananda's life. His desire to leave everything behind for spiritual gain is tempered by the realization that his path may not involve physical isolation, but rather a spiritual journey that can be undertaken within the context of his everyday life. Chapter 5. A Perfume Saint Displays His Wonders. In Chapter 5 of Autobiography of a Yogi, Yogananda meets a remarkable saint known as Ganda Baba, the perfume saint. Ganda Baba is famous for his yogic ability to manifest fragrances and perfumes through supernatural powers. Intrigued by this mystical ability, Yogananda and his friend Jitendra decide to visit him to witness these miracles firsthand. Gonda Baba performs his astonishing feat by asking Yogananda what fragrance he would like to experience. When Yogananda chooses jasmine, Gonda Baba rubs his hand and miraculously produces the scent of jasmine, followed by other fragrances at Yogananda's request. The saint explains that he can manifest any fragrance by controlling the bare atoms through his mastery of yogic power, thus transforming them into the desired scent. Although impressed by the display of supernatural abilities, Yogananda becomes more reflective after the encounter. He acknowledges that while such powers, known as siddhis, are possible, they are not the ultimate goal of the spiritual path. Yogananda reflects on how yogic powers can sometimes become distractions that pull seekers away from the higher purpose of union with God. While Gonda Baba's abilities are fascinating, Yogananda concludes that focusing on the deeper aspects of spiritual realization, love, devotion, and meditation holds more value than performing miracles. This chapter underscores the distinction between using yogic powers for show and the deeper, more profound aim of spiritual life, achieving self-realization and divine communion. Chapter 6. The Tiger Swami. In Chapter 6, Yogananda meets another unique individual, the Tiger Swami, a saint known for his extraordinary physical strength and fearless confrontation with wild tigers. The chapter opens with Yogananda's curiosity about this Swami, who is reputed for his ability to fight tigers with his bare hands. Yogananda visits the Tiger Swami, whose real name is Sohang Swami, to learn more about his spiritual and physical feats. Sohang Swami narrates his life story, explaining how he developed physical strength and courage from a young age. He began challenging wild animals, especially tigers, to prove his mastery over fear and brute strength. The Swami describes several encounters with ferocious tigers, including his famous victory over a particularly savage tiger that had killed many people. This incident earned him the title of Tiger Swami. Despite his accomplishments in conquering wild animals, Sohang Swami eventually realized that physical strength and the power to overcome external challenges were not the ultimate goal of life. He experienced a spiritual awakening, which led him to renounce worldly displays of power and pursue inner spiritual development. He understood that true courage and strength come from conquering inner fears and desires rather than external forces. Yogananda is deeply inspired by the Tiger Swami's transformation from a man obsessed with physical power to a sage focused on spiritual enlightenment. This chapter highlights the theme of transformation and the realization that the true essence of spirituality lies not in conquering the physical world, but in mastering the mind and spirit. Through his meeting with the Tiger Swami, Yogananda learns that while strength and fearlessness are admirable traits, they are not substitutes for the deeper qualities of love, humility, and self-realization, which are the true goals of a spiritual life. Chapter 7. The Levitating Saint. In Chapter 7 of Autobiography of a Yogi, Yogananda encounters a saint known for his ability to levitate, Baduri Mahasaya, or the Levitating Saint. This chapter continues Yogananda's exploration of the mystical powers of advanced yogis, but it also emphasizes that these powers, while remarkable, are byproducts of spiritual mastery and not the ultimate goal. Yogananda is introduced to Baduri Mahasaya through a friend, and during the visit, he observes firsthand the saint's deep state of meditation and spiritual power. Baduri Mahasaya is able to suspend the laws of gravity and levitate, a feat that amazes and inspires Yogananda. The saint, however, remains humble and emphasizes that such powers are simply side effects of deeper spiritual realization. During the visit, Baduri Mahasaya engages in a conversation with some householders, advising them on the importance of maintaining spiritual practice even while living in the world. He stresses that renunciation does not necessarily mean abandoning one's duties or family life. Rather, it involves cultivating detachment from material desires and focusing on spiritual growth. This teaching resonates deeply with Yogananda, as it aligns with his understanding that true spirituality can be pursued regardless of one's external circumstances. The levitating saint also teaches that spiritual realization leads to mastery over the physical body and mind, which naturally results in phenomena like levitation. However, he makes it clear that the goal of yoga is not the acquisition of such powers, but the realization of one's oneness with God. This chapter reinforces Yogananda's growing understanding that while supernatural abilities can serve as proof of spiritual progress, they are secondary to the ultimate aim of union with the divine. Bhaduri Mahasaya's humility and wisdom inspire Yogananda to continue on his path of seeking deeper spiritual truths. Chapter 9. The Blissful Devotee and His Cosmic Romance. In Chapter 9 of Autobiography of a Yogi, Yogananda introduces Swami Kebalananda, a devout disciple of Lahiri Mahasaya and a close acquaintance of Yogananda's family. Swami Kebalananda is described as a deeply devoted and blissful saint who experiences a constant connection with the divine, which he refers to as his cosmic romance. This chapter explores the joy and ecstasy that come from spiritual devotion and the deeper experiences of communion with God. Swami Kebalananda is a humble and gentle figure who has devoted his life to spiritual practice, and his devotion to Lahiri Mahasaya is unwavering. He explains to Yogananda that true spiritual practice leads to an intimate relationship with the divine, a romance with God, where the soul feels an ever-present love, bliss, and connection with the higher reality. The phrase cosmic romance symbolizes the ecstatic union between the individual soul and the infinite, a state of deep, divine love and joy that fills the devotee's heart. Kebalananda teaches Yogananda that spiritual practice, especially meditation and devotion, naturally leads to this experience of bliss. He recounts stories about his time with Lahiri Mahasaya, emphasizing his master's teachings on Kriya Yoga and the importance of direct communion with God through inner stillness. Yogananda is deeply moved by Swami Kebalananda's peaceful and blissful nature, recognizing that this state of constant divine communion is the ultimate goal of spiritual life. Through this chapter, Yogananda conveys that devotion and spiritual discipline, when practiced sincerely, lead to a direct and joyful experience of God's presence in everyday life. Chapter 10. I Meet My Master, Sri Yukswar. Chapter 10 is one of the most pivotal chapters in Autobiography of a Yogi because it recounts the long-awaited meeting between Yogananda and his spiritual guru, Swami Sri Yukswar. This meeting marks a transformative moment in Yogananda's life as he finally finds the master he has been seeking, who will guide him on the path of spiritual enlightenment. Yogananda describes his first encounter with Sri Yukswar in vivid detail. While walking through the crowded streets of Benares, Varanasi, Yogananda sees a man of great spiritual power and dignity. Instantly, he recognizes this figure as the master who had appeared to him in a vision years earlier. Overwhelmed with emotion, Yogananda rushes to Sri Yukswar and bows at his feet, expressing his desire to be accepted as his disciple. Sri Yukswar, with calm wisdom, responds to Yogananda with a deep understanding of his spiritual aspirations. The bond between the two is immediate and profound, as though they had known each other across lifetimes. Sri Yukswar tells Yogananda that he has been waiting for him and that their meeting was destined. He also reveals that Yogananda was his disciple in a past life, and that their guru-disciple relationship is being renewed in this life. Sri Yukswar's first words to Yogananda convey the essence of his teachings: the importance of self-discipline, spiritual wisdom, and the path of Kriya Yoga as the most effective means of attaining self-realization. Sri Yukswar is a stern but loving master, known for his rigorous approach to spiritual training. He emphasizes that the true purpose of a guru is to help the disciple overcome the ego and realize their oneness with God. Yogananda feels an immediate sense of devotion and surrender to Sri Yukswar, realizing that he has found the spiritual guide who will help him achieve the highest goal of life, union with the divine. The chapter closes with Yogananda feeling immense gratitude for the blessing of meeting his guru, whose guidance will shape the course of his spiritual journey. This chapter highlights the deep and sacred bond between a guru and disciple, which is central to Yogananda's spiritual philosophy. It also marks the beginning of Yogananda's intensive training under Sri Yukswar, which will ultimately lead to his own realization and mission of spreading spiritual wisdom throughout the world. Chapter 11. Two Penniless Boys in Brindaban. In Chapter 11 of Autobiography of a Yogi, Yogananda recounts an extraordinary adventure that he and his friend Jitendra undertook as an experiment in divine faith. The chapter is set in Brindaban, a holy town associated with Lord Krishna, where the two boys decided to test whether God would provide for them without any material resources. Yogananda, inspired by the idea that complete faith in God would bring divine intervention and support, proposes a challenge to his friend Jitendra. They would go to Brindaban without any money and trust that God would take care of all their needs, including food, shelter, and travel. Jitendra is hesitant but agrees to go along with the experiment, intrigued by Yogananda's unwavering faith. Upon arriving in Brindaban, Yogananda and Jitendra spend time exploring the holy sites and immersing themselves in the spiritual atmosphere of the town. Initially, Jitendra is nervous about how they will survive without money, but Yogananda reassures him that God will provide. Soon enough, divine intervention occurs in unexpected ways. They encounter a stranger who, without being asked, invites them to a feast at his home. After enjoying a sumptuous meal, the same stranger arranges for their lodging, ensuring they are taken care of during their stay. Later, another benefactor offers to pay for their train tickets back to Agra, completing the challenge Yogananda had set out with. Throughout the adventure, Yogananda remains calm and confident, trusting fully in the divine plan, while Jitendra is amazed by how effortlessly their needs are met. The experience leaves a lasting impression on both boys, strengthening Yogananda's faith in the protective and supportive presence of God. This chapter underscores the theme of faith in divine providence. Yogananda illustrates that by surrendering to God and trusting in the higher powers, one's needs will always be met, even when the material world seems uncertain. It also conveys the idea that God is ever present in our lives, ready to help those who maintain their faith and surrender to divine will. Chapter 12. Years in my Master's Hermitage. In Chapter 12 of Autobiography of a Yogi, Yogananda describes his transformative years spent living under the guidance of his guru, Sri Yukswar, in his ashram, Hermitage in Serampore. These years mark a period of intense spiritual discipline, learning, and personal growth for Yogananda. Yogananda shares how Sri Yukswar's rigorous but loving mentorship shaped his spiritual path. Sri Yukswar was known for his strict, no-nonsense approach to teaching, focusing on self-discipline, detachment, and inner spiritual development. He emphasized the importance of meditation and the practice of Kriya Yoga, which he considered essential for achieving self-realization. Sri Yukswar's goal was to help Yogananda rise above ego and worldly distractions to attain a direct experience of God. Yogananda describes Sri Yukswar as an enlightened master who possessed a deep understanding of the scriptures, science, and spiritual truths. He guided Yogananda not just through spiritual lessons, but also with practical wisdom on how to live in the world. Despite his stern exterior, Sri Yukswar displayed great love and concern for Yogananda's growth and well-being, offering personal insights and guidance tailored to his disciples' spiritual needs. Yogananda also recounts various mystical experiences he had during his time at the Hermitage, including visions and moments of profound spiritual realization. He reflects on how these years under Sri Yukswar's mentorship were critical to his own spiritual evolution, preparing him for his future mission of spreading spiritual knowledge to the West. This chapter highlights the importance of the guru-disciple relationship in Yogananda's life, illustrating how the presence of an enlightened master is crucial for guiding a seeker on the path of self-realization. Chapter 13. The Sleepless Saint. In Chapter 13, Yogananda introduces another fascinating figure on his spiritual journey, Ram Gopal Majumdar, who is referred to as the Sleepless Saint. Ram Gopal is known for his extraordinary ability to go without sleep for long periods, as a result of his deep and advanced spiritual practice. Yogananda meets Ram Gopal through the recommendation of Sri Yukswar, who suggests that Yogananda visit this advanced yogi. Ram Gopal lives in a remote part of the Bengal countryside, and Yogananda travels there to learn from him. Upon meeting him, Yogananda is struck by Ram Gopal's serene and powerful presence, which radiates the effects of his spiritual mastery. Ram Gopal explains that his sleeplessness is due to his intense focus on meditation and inner communion with God. Instead of needing rest, he is constantly energized by the spiritual bliss he experiences through deep meditation. He shares with Yogananda the importance of unwavering dedication to meditation and how it leads to spiritual awakening and the realization of God. During the meeting, Ram Gopal tells Yogananda about his own spiritual journey and his years of practice in the Himalayas. He also emphasizes that, with determination and sincere practice, anyone can achieve higher states of consciousness and communion with the divine. Yogananda spends the night meditating in Ram Gopal's cave and experiences a profound spiritual awakening during the night. He realizes that the path of spiritual discipline, devotion, and constant meditation is the key to achieving divine realization, reinforcing the teachings of Sri Yukswar. This chapter emphasizes the power of meditation and the ability of dedicated yogis to transcend the limitations of the body, such as sleep, by living in a state of constant communion with God. It serves as an inspiration for Yogananda to deepen his own spiritual practice. Chapter 14. An Experience in Cosmic Consciousness. Chapter 14 is one of the most significant chapters in Autobiography of a Yogi, as it describes Yogananda's first experience of cosmic consciousness, or samadhi, under the guidance of Sri Yukswar. This is a pivotal moment in Yogananda's spiritual journey, where he attains a direct, overwhelming experience of unity with the infinite. One day, during his time at Sri Yukswar's hermitage, Yogananda feels a surge of spiritual energy and a deep desire to go beyond his normal state of consciousness. Sensing his readiness, Sri Yukswar gently touches Yogananda's chest, and immediately Yogananda is launched into an ecstatic state of cosmic consciousness. In this state, he feels an overwhelming sense of oneness with the entire universe. He perceives the interconnectedness of all things and experiences the divine presence that pervades everything in existence. Yogananda describes this experience in vivid detail, explaining how his senses expanded beyond the physical realm. He could see, hear, and feel everything in the universe as part of his own consciousness. He understood that the world of form and matter is a projection of the divine, and behind all appearances is the infinite spirit of God. In this state of samadhi, Yogananda realizes the eternal truths of the universe, that life and death are mere transitions in the eternal flow of existence, that the soul is immortal, and that God is the underlying reality behind all creation. He feels an intense, indescribable bliss and love during this experience, which leaves an indelible impression on his soul. After returning to his normal consciousness, Yogananda reflects on the experience with deep gratitude for Sri Yukswar, who had facilitated this profound spiritual awakening. He realizes that the experience of cosmic consciousness is the ultimate goal of all spiritual practice, a state of union with the divine that transcends the ego and the limitations of the physical world. This chapter highlights the ultimate purpose of yoga and spiritual practice, to experience the oneness of all creation and realize God as the true source of everything. Yogananda's experience of samadhi confirms the teachings of his guru and the ancient yogic wisdom that direct communion with the divine is possible through deep meditation and devotion. Chapter 15. The Cauliflower Robbery. In Chapter 15 of Autobiography of a Yogi, Yogananda recounts a humorous and light-hearted event that occurred at his guru Sri Yukteswar's ashram in Serampore. The story involves the theft of several cauliflowers that had been carefully grown in the ashram's garden. Yogananda and the other disciples were excited about the prospect of cooking and enjoying the cauliflowers, but one morning they discovered that they had been stolen. The ashram was located in a poor neighborhood, and Yogananda suspected that a local villager might have taken them. Sri Yukteswar, however, treated the incident with detachment, laughing at Yogananda's concerns and suggesting that the thief needed the cauliflowers more than they did. The event is memorable because it highlights Sri Yukteswar's philosophical outlook on life. He teaches Yogananda that true yogis should remain unaffected by such worldly incidents and should cultivate non-attachment. Sri Yukteswar uses this simple occurrence to remind his disciples that clinging to material possessions or becoming upset over minor matters only distracts from spiritual growth. This chapter reinforces the themes of non-attachment, detachment from material goods, and maintaining a sense of humor and lightheartedness in the face of everyday challenges. Yogananda reflects on how this incident, though trivial, was a valuable lesson in maintaining inner peace and equanimity, regardless of external circumstances. Chapter 16, Outwitting the Stars. Chapter 16 focuses on Yogananda's interactions with astrologers and his guru Sri Yukteswar's views on astrology. Yogananda begins by discussing the widespread belief in India that planetary positions influence a person's fate and destiny. While many people use astrology to guide their decisions, Sri Yukteswar teaches Yogananda that true spiritual seekers can rise above astrological influences by cultivating self-realization. Yogananda recounts how, in his youth, he was introduced to astrology and even had his horoscope read by an astrologer. While the astrologer made accurate predictions about his life, Yogananda soon realized that placing too much importance on astrology could become a limitation. Sri Yukteswar, who had studied astrology, explained that while the planets can have an influence on human lives, they do not have the power to control a person's spiritual progress. Sri Yukteswar teaches that the real power to shape one's destiny lies within oneself. By practicing meditation and connecting with the divine, a person can transcend the influence of the stars and planets. Spiritual progress enables one to outwit astrological forces by aligning with higher spiritual laws that are not subject to the material world. Sri Yukteswar emphasizes that true freedom comes from self-realization, not from fear or dependence on external factors like astrology. This chapter illustrates the Guru's belief in the supremacy of spiritual effort over the limitations of material or cosmic influences. The chapter underscores the importance of free will, self-discipline, and spiritual practice in overcoming any predetermined fate or astrological influence. It highlights Yogananda's growing understanding that spiritual evolution is the key to transcending all external conditions, including astrological ones. Chapter 17, Sasi and the Three Sapphires. In Chapter 17, Yogananda shares the story of a young man named Sasi, one of Sri Yukteswar's disciples, who falls seriously ill. Sasi's story is one of faith karma and the impact of spiritual intervention. Sasi had been afflicted with a severe illness that threatened his life. Desperate to help him, Sri Yukteswar called for an astrologer to predict his fate. The astrologer informed them that Sasi's death was inevitable due to the position of the planets and the consequences of his past karma. However, Sri Yukteswar refused to accept this prediction without attempting to alter Sasi's destiny through divine grace. Sri Yukteswar prescribed 3 sapphires for Sasi to wear, believing that these stones would have a beneficial influence. Despite the astrologer's certainty that nothing could prevent Sasi's death, Sri Yukteswar's intervention and faith in divine power proved effective. Sasi's condition gradually improved, and he eventually recovered completely, defying both the astrological prediction and the doctor's prognosis. This chapter emphasizes the power of the Guru's grace and the ability to transcend karma and fate through spiritual means. While astrology can provide insight into the karmic forces that influence a person's life, it is not absolute. Through faith, divine intervention, and the guidance of a spiritually realized master, the seemingly unchangeable forces of karma can be altered. The story of Susi and the three sapphires illustrates the importance of faith in a guru, the belief in divine grace, and the possibility of transcending even the most challenging circumstances through spiritual means. Chapter 18. A Mohammedan Wonder Worker. Chapter 18 introduces a fascinating encounter between Yogananda and a Muslim mystic named Afzal Khan, who was known for his supernatural abilities. The chapter explores the idea of siddhis, spiritual powers, and how they manifest in the lives of advanced spiritual practitioners. Yogananda hears about Afzal Khan's miraculous powers and decides to visit him. Afzal Khan had gained a reputation as a wonder worker who could perform miracles, such as curing the sick and materializing objects. Yogananda is intrigued by the stories and wants to meet the mystic to observe his powers firsthand. During the visit, Yogananda witnesses Afzal Khan's abilities, including his power to cure a man suffering from illness. Despite his miraculous abilities, Afzal Khan remains humble and explains that his powers are a result of his deep connection with God. He emphasizes that these powers are not the ultimate goal of spiritual practice, but simply manifestations of God's will. Afzal Khan also shares his spiritual journey with Yogananda, explaining how he attained these powers through years of devotion and spiritual practice. He advises Yogananda not to become overly focused on miracles or supernatural abilities, but to remain dedicated to seeking God and spiritual enlightenment. This chapter highlights the difference between siddhis, spiritual powers, and true spiritual realization. While siddhis can be impressive, they are ultimately distractions if they are not used in service of the divine. Afzal Khan's humility and wisdom remind Yogananda that the true goal of spiritual practice is to attain union with God, not to accumulate supernatural abilities. Through his encounter with Afzal Khan, Yogananda learns the importance of humility, devotion, and remaining focused on the higher spiritual purpose, rather than being dazzled by external displays of power. The chapter reinforces the central theme of Autobiography of a Yogi, that the ultimate aim of life is self-realization and communion with the divine. Chapter 19, My Master in Calcutta, appears in Serampore. In Chapter 19 of Autobiography of a Yogi, Yogananda shares a miraculous event that reveals the supernatural powers of his guru, Sri Yukswar, and underscores the deep spiritual connection between guru and disciple. The chapter recounts how Sri Yukswar was able to appear in two places at the same time, an extraordinary feat known as bilocation. Yogananda describes how one day, while staying at Sri Yukswar's hermitage in Serampore, he had an intense desire to see his guru, who was in Calcutta at the time. Although the distance between Serampore and Calcutta was considerable, Yogananda's longing to see Sri Yukswar was overwhelming. To Yogananda's amazement, Sri Yukswar suddenly appeared in the Serampore ashram, smiling and acknowledging his disciples' deep yearning. Sri Yukswar spoke briefly with Yogananda before disappearing. The next day, Yogananda traveled to Calcutta and asked Sri Yukswar about the previous day's experience. Sri Yukswar confirmed that he had indeed appeared in Serampore, explaining that advanced yogis can manifest themselves in different locations simultaneously through the power of their consciousness. This chapter highlights Sri Yukswar's mastery over the physical world and the extraordinary capabilities of enlightened yogis. Yogananda uses this event to illustrate the deep spiritual bond between guru and disciple, suggesting that a true master can respond to a disciple's inner call, even across vast distances. The story also demonstrates the concept of siddhis, spiritual powers, which can manifest as a result of deep spiritual realization. However, as always, Sri Yukswar emphasizes that such powers are not the goal of the spiritual path, but are natural byproducts of advanced spiritual states. Chapter 20. We do not visit Kashmir. Chapter 20 of Autobiography of a Yogi recounts a humorous but spiritually insightful story about a thwarted trip to Kashmir, a famous spiritual region in India, and how divine intervention subtly guides human actions, even when they seem frustrating or inexplicable at the time. Yogananda, along with a few fellow disciples, had been excitedly planning a trip to Kashmir, known for its scenic beauty and spiritual significance. The group was eager to visit this holy land for both pilgrimage and relaxation. However, on the day they were supposed to leave, several unexpected obstacles arose that prevented them from making the journey. At first, Yogananda and his friends were disappointed and confused. They had meticulously planned the trip, and the sudden change in plans seemed unfair and unfortunate. But as events unfolded, it became clear that their trip was being divinely redirected for a greater purpose. Later, Yogananda learned that the trip to Kashmir was avoided because it would have brought them into contact with unfavorable situations, potentially involving illness or danger. He came to realize that what seemed like bad luck or coincidence was, in fact, divine guidance protecting them from harm. Yogananda reflects on this experience as a valuable spiritual lesson in surrendering to divine will. He learns that not all desires, even seemingly noble ones, are meant to be fulfilled according to human plans. Sometimes, divine wisdom intervenes to prevent unfavorable outcomes, even if it goes against immediate expectations. This chapter underscores the importance of trusting in God's will and remaining flexible in the face of unforeseen circumstances. It teaches that sometimes what seems like a disappointment or failure is actually a blessing in disguise, guided by higher forces for one's protection and spiritual growth. The lesson Yogananda conveys here is the value of surrendering personal plans and desires to the divine, understanding that true wisdom often lies in the unseen workings of the universe. Chapter 21. We visit Kashmir. In Chapter 21 of Autobiography of a Yogi, Yogananda describes a successful pilgrimage to Kashmir, a spiritual journey that he and his disciples had previously attempted but was thwarted in Chapter 20. This time, the trip proceeds without any obstacles, and Yogananda reflects on the beauty and serenity of Kashmir, which is often referred to as paradise on earth due to its natural beauty. The trip to Kashmir holds significant spiritual value for Yogananda and his companions, who visit various sacred sites. They experience a sense of spiritual rejuvenation in the peaceful, majestic surroundings. Yogananda reflects on how nature, when unspoiled and pristine, can serve as a powerful reminder of the divine presence, offering a sense of unity and connectedness with God. While the chapter focuses on the physical journey through Kashmir, it also highlights the inner spiritual journey that Yogananda and his companions undergo during the pilgrimage. He emphasizes that such journeys, while taking place in the material world, are often symbolic of deeper spiritual transformations. The peace and stillness of the natural world in Kashmir inspire deeper meditation and communion with the divine. This chapter contrasts with the previous chapter, 20, where their plans were thwarted, emphasizing the importance of divine timing. It teaches that when the time is right, and the will of the divine aligns with human intentions, even challenging or delayed plans can unfold effortlessly. Chapter 22. The Heart of a Stone Image. Chapter 22 recounts Yogananda's encounter with an idol of goddess Kali that seemed to come alive, showing the divine presence in even inanimate objects. Yogananda had long held a desire to experience a direct vision of the goddess, who is revered in Hinduism as a powerful aspect of the Divine Mother. One day, Yogananda visits the Dakshineswar temple, which houses a famous stone image of goddess Kali. While meditating deeply in front of the image, Yogananda experiences a miraculous vision. The stone idol seems to come to life, and Yogananda feels an overwhelming sense of the goddess's living presence. In this moment, he experiences a profound spiritual realization that divine consciousness can manifest in any form, even in a seemingly lifeless object. The experience reinforces Yogananda's understanding that God and the divine can be found everywhere, in all aspects of creation, both animate and inanimate. The encounter with the stone image of Kali serves as a reminder that divine power and consciousness pervade the entire universe, and that devotional practice, coupled with deep meditation, can lead to direct experiences of God. Yogananda reflects on the importance of sincere devotion in accessing the divine. He emphasizes that those who seek God with purity of heart and a deep desire for spiritual realization will ultimately experience divine grace and presence. This chapter illustrates the power of devotion, the universality of divine consciousness, and the transformative potential of deep spiritual experiences. Chapter 23. I receive my university degree. In Chapter 23, Yogananda discusses an important phase of his life, completing his formal education. Despite his deep immersion in spiritual practice and his intense desire to dedicate his life entirely to God and his guru, Sri Yuksawar encouraged Yogananda to finish his university studies and earn a degree. Yogananda had little interest in formal education, as his primary focus was on spiritual development. However, out of respect for Sri Yuksawar's wishes, he remained committed to completing his studies. In this chapter, Yogananda describes the struggle he faced balancing his academic responsibilities with his spiritual aspirations. With Sri Yuksawar's guidance, Yogananda learns that spiritual development does not require abandoning worldly responsibilities. Instead, it is possible to fulfill one's duties in the world while remaining deeply rooted in spiritual practice. Through this process, Yogananda gains a new perspective on the role of education and duty in life. Yogananda finally graduates from Calcutta University, fulfilling his guru's wishes. He reflects on the importance of following the guidance of a guru, even when it conflicts with personal desires. Sri Yuksawar's wisdom in advising Yogananda to complete his education becomes clear as Yogananda realizes that his formal education would later help him in his mission to bring yoga and spiritual teachings to the West. This chapter highlights the themes of discipline, responsibility, and the importance of balancing spiritual and worldly duties. It underscores the idea that spiritual seekers can successfully navigate both their spiritual and material responsibilities with the right guidance. Chapter 24. I become a monk of the Swami order. In Chapter 24, Yogananda describes a significant moment in his spiritual journey, his formal initiation into the Swami order, a monastic tradition in India that represents a life of renunciation and dedication to God. This initiation marks Yogananda's formal commitment to a life of complete spiritual discipline, detachment from worldly pursuits, and service to the divine. The chapter begins with Yogananda receiving his spiritual name, Swami Yogananda Giri, which signifies his new role as a monk. The initiation ceremony is a profound and transformative experience for him, as it represents the culmination of his years of spiritual training under the guidance of his guru, Sri Yuksawar. Becoming a monk of the Swami order is not just a formal change for Yogananda, but a deep inner commitment to the ideals of renunciation and selfless service. Yogananda explains that the path of a Swami involves giving up personal attachments, desires, and ambitions in favor of a life devoted to the pursuit of God realization. Sri Yuksawar's role as Yogananda's guide and mentor is again emphasized, as it was Sri Yuksawar who initiated Yogananda into the Swami order. Yogananda reflects on the deep bond between guru and disciple and the importance of surrendering to the guru's wisdom in order to advance on the spiritual path. This chapter highlights the importance of monasticism in Yogananda's life, not only as a personal choice, but as a step toward fulfilling his larger mission of spreading spiritual teachings. It also illustrates the theme of renunciation, which is central to the spiritual path in many yogic traditions. Chapter 25. Brother Ananta and Sister Nalini. Chapter 25 focuses on Yogananda's relationship with his family, particularly his elder brother Ananta and his sister Nalini. Through these relationships, Yogananda reflects on the importance of family ties and the balancing of familial responsibilities with spiritual goals. Yogananda's brother Ananta plays a significant role in this chapter. Ananta, while supportive of Yogananda's spiritual path, often expresses concern for his younger brother's well-being and future. He encourages Yogananda to maintain practical concerns, such as financial stability, alongside his spiritual pursuits. Their relationship represents the tension between worldly responsibilities and spiritual aspirations that Yogananda has navigated throughout his life. Nalini, Yogananda's sister, is introduced as someone who shares a close bond with him. Yogananda emphasizes the love and mutual respect that existed between them, despite their different life paths. Nalini, who remained focused on her family and household, provided Yogananda with unwavering emotional support. While this chapter highlights Yogananda's deep love and connection with his family, it also underscores his growing detachment from worldly attachments. As he advances on his spiritual path, Yogananda's love for his family becomes less focused on personal relationships and more on a universal sense of compassion and service to all beings. Yogananda's reflections on family relationships demonstrate that while familial bonds are important, they should not distract from one's spiritual path. Instead, these relationships can serve as opportunities for growth, understanding, and the development of unconditional love. The chapter also emphasizes the importance of maintaining balance in life, fulfilling one's responsibilities while remaining devoted to spiritual ideals. Chapter 26, The Science of Kriya Yoga. In Chapter 26 of Autobiography of a Yogi, Yogananda introduces one of the most important aspects of his spiritual teachings, Kriya Yoga. This chapter provides an in-depth explanation of Kriya Yoga, which is a powerful and ancient technique of meditation that leads to accelerated spiritual growth. Yogananda explains that Kriya Yoga is a scientific method to achieve direct experience of God. It is a technique passed down through a lineage of great masters, including Babaji and Lahiri Mahasaya. Kriya Yoga works by controlling the life force, prana, and redirecting it upward through the spine, allowing the practitioner to transcend body consciousness and enter into states of deep spiritual awareness. The chapter details how Kriya Yoga helps accelerate spiritual evolution, as it purifies the mind and body, frees the practitioner from karma, and awakens higher states of consciousness. According to Yogananda, Kriya Yoga allows a person to achieve the same spiritual progress in a short period of time that would normally take lifetimes. Yogananda emphasizes that the practice of Kriya Yoga is not just about physical or mental discipline. It is about deepening one's relationship with God and reaching a state of unity with the divine. He also stresses that Kriya Yoga should be practiced with devotion and under the guidance of an experienced teacher or guru. This chapter highlights the transformative power of Kriya Yoga and its central role in Yogananda's teachings. It underscores the importance of a direct, scientific approach to spiritual growth that allows practitioners to experience God, not just as an abstract concept, but as a living reality. Chapter 27, Founding a Yoga School at Ranchi. In Chapter 27, Yogananda discusses his early efforts to spread the teachings of yoga by founding a school in Ranchi, India. The school was a significant milestone in Yogananda's mission to bring spiritual education and holistic learning to young people. Yogananda's vision for the school was not just to provide traditional academic education, but to integrate spiritual teachings with physical, mental, and moral development. The curriculum included yoga, meditation, and Kriya Yoga practice, along with subjects like science, history, and the arts. The goal was to develop well-rounded students who could achieve both worldly success and spiritual fulfillment. Yogananda's school at Ranchi attracted many students and quickly gained a reputation for its unique and holistic approach to education. Yogananda also reflects on how his guru, Sri Yukswar, supported and encouraged him in this endeavor, further strengthening their bond. This chapter illustrates Yogananda's belief in the importance of early spiritual education. He saw the value of nurturing young minds and souls to become not only knowledgeable, but also deeply connected to their inner divine nature. The school at Ranchi was a manifestation of Yogananda's vision of a balanced life, where spiritual and worldly knowledge coexisted harmoniously. Chapter 28, Kashi, Reborn and Rediscovered. Chapter 28 tells the story of Kashi, a young boy who worked as a servant at Sri Yukswar's hermitage. Kashi suffered from various health issues and eventually passed away. But the story takes a miraculous turn when Sri Yukswar reveals to Yogananda that Kashi had been reincarnated and that they would meet him again. Several years later, Yogananda and Sri Yukswar visit a nearby town and, to Yogananda's amazement, they encounter a young boy who resembles Kashi in both appearance and mannerisms. Sri Yukswar confirms that this boy is indeed Kashi, reborn in a new body, but with the same soul. This chapter underscores Yogananda's and Sri Yukswar's belief in reincarnation and the continuity of the soul across lifetimes. The story of Kashi demonstrates the Guru's ability to perceive spiritual truths that are beyond ordinary understanding. It also highlights the close karma ties between individuals, as well as the possibility of recognizing and reconnecting with souls from previous lives. Yogananda reflects on the profound mystery of life, death, and rebirth, reminding readers that the soul's journey is eternal and that each lifetime offers opportunities for spiritual growth. Chapter 29, Rabindranath Tagore and I Compare Schools. In Chapter 29, Yogananda recounts his meeting with the famous Bengali poet and Nobel laureate Rabindranath Tagore. The two had a mutual interest in education, and this chapter focuses on their conversation about their respective educational philosophies. Tagore had founded a school called Shantiniketan, which emphasized creative learning, freedom of expression, and a harmonious relationship with nature. Yogananda's school at Ranchi shared similar ideals, particularly in its integration of spiritual values with academic learning. During their meeting, Yogananda and Tagore discussed the importance of balancing intellectual development with moral and spiritual growth. They both believed that education should not be confined to the mind alone, but should encompass the entire being, including the body, emotions, and soul. This chapter highlights Yogananda's respect for Tagore as a visionary educator and poet, and it reflects their shared concern for the future of education in India. Yogananda emphasizes that the ultimate goal of education should be to awaken the divine potential within each individual, a view that aligned closely with Tagore's ideals. Chapter 30, The Law of Miracles. Chapter 30 explores the concept of miracles and the underlying scientific principles that govern them. Yogananda explains that what we perceive as miracles are not violations of natural laws, but rather expressions of higher laws that are not yet fully understood by science. Yogananda discusses the nature of reality and how the physical world is a projection of energy and consciousness. He draws on principles from both Eastern philosophy and modern physics, particularly the idea that matter is composed of vibrations of energy. Yogananda suggests that advanced yogis, who have mastered the control of energy and consciousness, can manipulate these vibrations to perform what appear to be miracles. The chapter offers examples of miraculous feats performed by yogis, such as levitation, materialization, and the ability to heal. Yogananda explains that these miracles are made possible through deep meditation and the mastery of higher states of consciousness. The law of miracles is essentially the understanding that the material world is malleable and that consciousness is the true creative force behind all phenomena. Advanced yogis, through their spiritual practices, are able to tap into this higher reality and, in doing so, transcend the limitations of physical laws. Yogananda concludes the chapter by emphasizing that miracles are not the ultimate goal of spiritual practice. Rather, they are natural outcomes of spiritual progress. The true purpose of the spiritual path is to realize one's unity with God and to transcend the illusions of the material world. This chapter serves as a bridge between Yogananda's spiritual teachings and modern science, showing how the two can coexist and even complement each other. It reinforces the idea that the universe operates according to divine laws, which can be understood and accessed through spiritual practice. Chapter 31. An interview with the Sacred Mother. In Chapter 31 of Autobiography of a Yogi, Yogananda recounts a remarkable meeting with Anandamayi Ma, a revered female saint of India. Yogananda describes her as a highly advanced spiritual being, whose divine presence and wisdom deeply affected him. Yogananda and a group of his disciples visit Anandamayi Ma's ashram, where they witness her spontaneous and joyful expressions of divine bliss. Anandamayi Ma is known for her state of perpetual communion with God, and her actions are often described as being guided by divine will rather than personal choice. Yogananda is impressed by her purity and humility, as she openly declares that she has no personal identity apart from God. During the meeting, Anandamayi Ma and Yogananda engage in a spiritual conversation. She speaks about her own spiritual experiences and emphasizes that her state of constant divine ecstasy is accessible to anyone who seeks God sincerely. She reinforces the idea that God is both transcendent and immanent, present in every aspect of creation. This chapter highlights the universality of spiritual truth and how it transcends gender and form. Yogananda is deeply inspired by Anandamayi Ma's example of living in complete surrender to the divine. Her teachings emphasize the path of devotion and love for God as a means to achieve spiritual liberation. Chapter 32. Rama is raised from the dead. Chapter 32 recounts a miraculous event in which Sri Yukswar revives a boy named Rama, who had died from cholera. Yogananda vividly describes how Sri Yukswar demonstrates his mastery over life and death, illustrating the extraordinary powers that a highly realized yogi can wield. Yogananda and Sri Yukswar are called to the home of a grieving family, where Rama has recently passed away. The family is devastated, but Yogananda and Sri Yukswar remain calm and composed. Sri Yukswar asks for the boy's body to be prepared for burial, but soon performs a ritual that restores life to Rama's lifeless body. The boy awakens, to the astonishment of everyone present. Sri Yukswar later explains to Yogananda that such miracles are possible when a yogi has mastered the subtle energies that govern life and death. He emphasizes, however, that such powers should not be sought after for their own sake, but rather as a natural consequence of deep spiritual realization. The chapter illustrates the immense spiritual power that enlightened beings possess, as well as their compassion and willingness to use that power for the benefit of others. It also reinforces the concept of siddhis or spiritual powers, which can arise as a result of deep yogic practice, but are not the ultimate goal of the spiritual path. Chapter 33. Babaji, the Yogi Christ of modern India. Chapter 33 introduces the legendary figure of Mahavatar Babaji, whom Yogananda describes as the immortal yogi who has guided the spiritual evolution of humanity for centuries. Babaji is often referred to as the Yogi Christ of modern India, and Yogananda's description of him emphasizes both his transcendence and his loving guidance over the spiritual progress of humanity. Yogananda recounts various stories of Babaji's miraculous powers, his ability to appear and disappear at will, and his mission to aid humanity's spiritual evolution. Babaji is portrayed as a being of infinite wisdom and compassion, who remains hidden from the public eye, but actively works to uplift humanity by guiding advanced souls like Lahiri Mahasaya, Sri Yukswar, and Yogananda himself. One of the most significant aspects of Babaji's mission, as described in the chapter, is his revival of Kriya Yoga in the modern era. Babaji reintroduced Kriya Yoga to Lahiri Mahasaya, who in turn passed it on to Sri Yukswar and Yogananda. This lineage of gurus is responsible for bringing Kriya Yoga to the world, allowing sincere seekers to accelerate their spiritual progress. The chapter emphasizes the eternal nature of Babaji, who continues to exist in a subtle, immortal body. Babaji's life serves as an inspiration for those on the spiritual path, representing the ideal of complete mastery over material reality and unwavering devotion to the upliftment of humanity. Chapter 34. Materializing a Palace in the Himalayas. In Chapter 34, Yogananda shares an extraordinary story of Babaji's ability to manifest physical objects, specifically a palace, in the Himalayan mountains. This chapter further illustrates Babaji's mastery over the material world and his ability to create objects at will through his understanding of the laws of energy and consciousness. The story begins with Babaji's small group of disciples expressing a desire for a more comfortable shelter while living in the rugged Himalayas. Babaji, aware of their thoughts, materializes a magnificent palace for them, complete with luxurious furnishings. The disciples are awestruck by the beauty and grandeur of the palace, but Babaji uses the experience to teach an important lesson. Babaji explains that while he can create anything in the material world through the power of his will, such manifestations are ultimately impermanent and illusory. The palace, although stunning, is a temporary structure that exists only as long as Babaji wishes it to. He emphasizes that true spiritual seekers should not be attached to material comforts or the external world, as these are fleeting and cannot provide lasting fulfillment. After the lesson is imparted, Babaji dematerializes the palace, leaving only the vastness of the Himalayan wilderness. The disciples are left with a deeper understanding of the transitory nature of the material world and the importance of focusing on the eternal, unchanging reality of the divine. This chapter serves as a reminder that the true goal of spiritual practice is not the attainment of miraculous powers or worldly success, but rather the realization of one's unity with God. Babaji's mastery over material creation is presented as an illustration of the illusory nature of the physical world and the importance of transcending attachment to it. Chapter 35. The Christ-like Life of Lahiri Mahasaya. In Chapter 35 of Autobiography of a Yogi, Yogananda reflects on the divine qualities and Christ-like life of his guru's guru, Lahiri Mahasaya. Lahiri Mahasaya was one of the most influential figures in the modern Kriya Yoga lineage, and his life was a powerful example of how spiritual realization can coexist with worldly duties. Lahiri Mahasaya was an unassuming householder who worked as a government employee, yet he attained the highest levels of spiritual mastery. This was significant because it demonstrated that renouncing worldly life was not a requirement for achieving enlightenment. Lahiri Mahasaya lived in a simple manner, teaching Kriya Yoga to those who sought him out while continuing his everyday work and family responsibilities. Yogananda highlights several miraculous incidents from Lahiri Mahasaya's life, including his ability to perform siddhis, spiritual powers, such as appearing in multiple places simultaneously and healing the sick. Yet, Lahiri Mahasaya remained humble and taught that such powers should not be the focus of spiritual practice. Instead, his emphasis was always on devotion to God and the practice of Kriya Yoga as the direct path to self-realization. The chapter also focuses on Lahiri Mahasaya's relationship with his disciples, many of whom were deeply transformed by his presence and teachings. His universal message was that the divine can be realized by all people, regardless of their societal roles or responsibilities, through sincere spiritual effort. Chapter 36. Babaji's Interest in the West. In Chapter 36, Yogananda explores the connection between the immortal Yogi Babaji and the West. Babaji, the founder of the Kriya Yoga lineage, is depicted as a timeless spiritual guide who has a deep concern for the spiritual evolution of all humanity, including the Western world. The chapter recounts a significant incident in which Babaji expressed his intention to spread the teachings of Kriya Yoga beyond India. Babaji met with a Western disciple who was brought to him through miraculous means. This disciple was told that Babaji's mission was to inspire spiritual awakening in the West, and that Kriya Yoga would play a vital role in this transformation. Yogananda explains that Babaji had chosen him to be the emissary of Kriya Yoga to the Western world, fulfilling Babaji's long-held desire. Babaji's message was that the spiritual teachings of the East, particularly Kriya Yoga, would help Westerners overcome materialism and achieve a deeper understanding of their own divine nature. Chapter 37. I Go to America. Chapter 37 marks a pivotal moment in Yogananda's life as he prepares to fulfill his divine mission of bringing the teachings of Kriya Yoga to the West. In 1920, following his guru Sri Yukswar's guidance, Yogananda embarks on a journey to America to introduce Eastern spiritual teachings to a new audience. Yogananda recounts the emotional and practical challenges he faced as he prepared to leave India, including saying goodbye to his family and spiritual community. Despite these challenges, he felt a deep sense of purpose and confidence that he was being divinely guided. Yogananda reflects on how both Sri Yukswar and Babaji had foretold his mission, which gave him the courage and clarity to move forward. After arriving in the United States, Yogananda quickly gained recognition for his spiritual knowledge and personal charisma. His first major public appearance was at the International Congress of Religious Liberals in Boston, where he delivered a lecture on the science of religion and the universality of truth. This event marked the beginning of Yogananda's mission to share the teachings of Kriya Yoga with the West. Chapter 38. Luther Burbank, a Saint Amidst the Roses. In Chapter 38 of Autobiography of a Yogi, Yogananda shares his deep admiration for Luther Burbank, the famous American horticulturist. Yogananda considers Burbank to be a modern-day saint, living a life of spiritual simplicity and service to humanity through his work with plants. Burbank's life exemplifies how one can combine scientific pursuits with spiritual ideals. Burbank is renowned for his plant-breeding work, having created numerous new varieties of plants. Yogananda emphasizes that Burbank's remarkable achievements in horticulture were rooted in his love for nature and his intuitive understanding of divine laws. Burbank believed that God's presence could be found in all of nature, and his work was a form of devotion. Yogananda recalls the deep friendship and mutual respect between them, and how Burbank's humility, wisdom, and compassion reflected his saintly nature. Burbank viewed plants as sentient beings and treated them with love and care, which, in Yogananda's view, contributed to his success. This chapter highlights the idea that spiritual realization can be expressed in all areas of life, including science, and that true greatness comes from a life of simplicity, service, and love for all living beings. Chapter 39. Therese Newman, the Catholic Stigmatist. In Chapter 39, Yogananda describes his visit to Therese Newman, a Catholic mystic in Germany who exhibited the stigmata, the wounds of Christ. Yogananda had heard of her miraculous abilities and was eager to meet her during his trip to Europe in 1935. Therese Newman was known for her spiritual devotion and the mysterious marks of Christ's crucifixion that appeared on her body. She had not eaten solid food or drunk water for many years, yet she remained healthy. Yogananda witnesses this remarkable phenomenon firsthand during his visit, as Therese Newman goes into a trance and relives the crucifixion of Christ, with blood flowing from her wounds. Yogananda was deeply moved by her intense devotion to Christ and recognized her as an authentic spiritual figure. He explains that Therese Newman's life was a testament to the power of divine grace, and her ability to transcend physical needs like food and water was evidence of her profound spiritual connection. Chapter 40. I Return to India. Chapter 40 describes Yogananda's return to India in 1935 after 15 years of spreading his teachings in America. His return is a significant event, both personally and spiritually, as Yogananda had long yearned to reconnect with his homeland and his guru, Sri Yukswar. Yogananda provides vivid descriptions of his emotional reunions with family, friends, and fellow disciples upon his arrival. He also reflects on the changes he observed in India, noting that while the country had modernized in some respects, its spiritual essence remained intact. Yogananda's return to India was also a pilgrimage to the holy sites and saints he had revered for many years. The chapter also highlights Yogananda's meetings with various Indian spiritual leaders, including Ramana Maharshi, one of India's most revered sages. Yogananda was deeply impressed by Ramana Maharshi's silent power and profound presence. His time in India was marked by a renewed connection to his spiritual roots and a sense of fulfillment in bringing the teachings of Kriya Yoga to the world. Chapter 41. An Idol in South India. In Chapter 41, Yogananda recounts his travels through South India, where he visited several sacred sites and met with various saints and sages. One of the most notable encounters was with Ramana Maharshi, a highly esteemed sage who was known for his teachings on self-inquiry and non-dualism. Yogananda describes Ramana Maharshi as a figure of serene simplicity and profound wisdom. Though Maharshi spoke little, his silent presence was powerful, radiating a deep sense of peace and spiritual knowledge. Yogananda was deeply impressed by his humility and the silent depth of his spiritual realization. Yogananda also visited many of South India's sacred temples, marveling at their beauty and the spiritual energy they embodied. The chapter illustrates Yogananda's appreciation for the diversity of spiritual expression in India, from the devotional fervor of temple worship to the quiet introspection of Ramana Maharshi's teachings. Chapter 42. The Bengali Joy-Permeated Mother. In Chapter 42 of Autobiography of a Yogi, Paramahansa Yogananda shares his encounter with the renowned woman saint, Ananda Mahima, during his travels in Bengal. Known for her constant state of divine bliss, Ananda Mahima radiated an overwhelming sense of spiritual joy and love for God, earning her the title Joy-Permeated Mother. Yogananda describes Ananda Mahima as a spiritual figure immersed in perpetual ecstasy, her life dedicated entirely to the divine. Despite her simple, humble demeanor and fragile body, her presence was filled with immense spiritual power. She would often fall into deep states of God communion, losing herself in divine absorption, regardless of her surroundings. Yogananda was deeply impressed by her wisdom, humility, and the profound peace that seemed to surround her. Ananda Mahima conveyed that true happiness is found within, through a continuous connection with God. She emphasized that spiritual joy is the natural state of the soul, and that all human suffering stems from ignorance of this truth. This chapter highlights Yogananda's appreciation for the depth of devotion and divine realization in India's saints and sages, with Ananda Mahima embodying a living example of pure, unconditional love for God. Chapter 43. The Woman Yogi Who Never Eats. In Chapter 43, Paramahansa Yogananda describes his meeting with Giribala, a remarkable woman yogi in Bengal who had achieved the yogic power of surviving without eating. Yogananda, intrigued by her unusual ability, travels to meet her in a remote village. Giribala explains that she was taught a special yogic technique by her guru that enabled her to live without consuming food for decades, relying instead on pranic energy, life force, for sustenance. Her mastery of this ancient yogic practice exemplifies the spiritual potential that lies within human beings when they transcend ordinary physical limitations. Yogananda is deeply impressed by Giribala's humility and spiritual strength, seeing her as a living example of how yogic powers can be developed through discipline and devotion. The chapter illustrates the extraordinary capabilities attained by yogis who dedicate themselves fully to spiritual practices. Chapter 44. With Mahatma Gandhi at Verda. In Chapter 44, Yogananda describes his visit to meet Mahatma Gandhi at his ashram in Verda. Gandhi, known for leading India's struggle for independence through nonviolence, is portrayed by Yogananda as a deeply spiritual man who embodied simplicity, humility, and a powerful commitment to truth, satyagraha. During their meeting, Yogananda introduces Gandhi to Kriya Yoga, explaining its benefits for personal peace and self-realization. Gandhi, ever open to spiritual practices, takes an interest in the technique, recognizing its value in his pursuit of inner calm and strength. Yogananda notes the serene atmosphere of Gandhi's ashram and the deep devotion of Gandhi's followers. He emphasizes Gandhi's spiritual strength, which powered his nonviolent movement, and his profound dedication to serving humanity. This chapter highlights the connection between spiritual realization and active engagement in the world, as embodied by Gandhi. Chapter 45. The Bengali Monk Who Taught in the West. In Chapter 45, Yogananda reflects on the life of Swami Vivekananda, the great Indian monk and disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, who introduced the teachings of Vedanta and yoga to the Western world. Yogananda expresses his admiration for Vivekananda's wisdom, fearlessness, and ability to communicate the deep spiritual truths of India to a Western audience. Yogananda recounts how Vivekananda's famous speech at the Parliament of the World's Religions in Chicago, 1893, gained global attention and brought respect to Indian spirituality. Vivekananda's emphasis on the unity of all religions and the universality of spiritual truth left a lasting impact on both East and West. This chapter serves as a tribute to Swami Vivekananda's efforts to bridge the spiritual knowledge of India with the West and his pioneering work in spreading the message of self-realization, service to humanity, and the importance of spiritual practice. Chapter 46. The Woman Who Slept Without Food for Over 50 Years. In Chapter 46, Yogananda shares the story of Therese Neumann, a Catholic mystic and stigmatist from Germany who claimed to have lived for many years without eating or drinking, sustained solely by divine energy. Fascinated by this miraculous phenomenon, Yogananda travels to Germany to meet her. Therese was known for her extraordinary experiences, including receiving the stigmata, wounds similar to those of Christ, and living without food or water, subsisting entirely on communion wafers. Yogananda describes his meeting with her and his observations of her deep devotion to Christ. He witnessed the power of her spiritual discipline, which allowed her to transcend ordinary bodily needs. Yogananda reflects on the parallels between Therese Neumann's mystical experiences and the yogic traditions of India, where advanced yogis sometimes achieved similar feats. The chapter underscores the universal nature of spiritual experiences, regardless of cultural or religious background. Chapter 47. I Return to the West. In Chapter 47, Yogananda narrates his decision to return to the United States after spending some time in India reconnecting with his spiritual roots and lineage. Having completed his visits to saints and sacred sites across India, he feels it is time to resume his mission in the West. He reflects on the cultural and spiritual differences between the East and the West, but also emphasizes the unity in the essential spiritual quest that transcends geography. Yogananda feels a deep connection with both India and America, recognizing the spiritual hunger in the West and the wealth of wisdom available in the East. This chapter also touches on Yogananda's sense of purpose as he prepares to continue spreading the teachings of Kriya Yoga and the universal spiritual truths he learned in India. His return to the West marks a new phase in his mission to unite Eastern wisdom with Western practicality. Chapter 48. At Encinitas, in California. In Chapter 48, Yogananda describes his experiences at the Encinitas Hermitage in California, a spiritual retreat established by his disciple Rajarsi Janakananda. This serene setting, overlooking the Pacific Ocean, becomes an important center for Yogananda's work in the West. The chapter conveys Yogananda's joy at having a peaceful place to focus on his spiritual practices and writings. The Encinitas Hermitage becomes a sanctuary for deep meditation and spiritual inspiration, where Yogananda continues to write and teach. Yogananda reflects on his personal experiences in America and his gratitude for the support he receives from his followers and students. he speaks of his vision for the spread of Kriya Yoga and the establishment of spiritual communities where individuals can live and practice in harmony with divine principles. This chapter highlights Yogananda's sense of accomplishment and peace as his mission in the West flourishes, with the Encinitas Hermitage serving as both a personal refuge and a symbol of the spiritual bridge he has built between East and West. The concluding chapter of Autobiography of a Yogi is Chapter 49, The Last Days. In this chapter, Yogananda reflects on the fulfillment of his spiritual mission and the completion of his life's work. He looks back on the incredible journey he has undertaken, from his early spiritual experiences in India to his role as a spiritual teacher in the West. He emphasizes the importance of sharing the teachings of Kriya Yoga and the universal truths that transcend religious and cultural boundaries. Yogananda acknowledges the inevitable transitions of life, expressing acceptance of the finite nature of the physical body while emphasizing the eternal, ever-living nature of the soul. His work, he assures, will continue through his teachings and the organization he established, the Self-Realization Fellowship (SRF), which would continue to spread the message of self-realization and universal spirituality. The conclusion of Autobiography of a Yogi serves as a reminder of the enduring nature of spiritual work, the joy and peace that comes from living in alignment with divine truth, and the power of inner transformation through practices like Kriya Yoga. Yogananda's legacy, he assures his readers, is not confined to his life, but will live on through the teachings, students, and seekers who follow the path to self-realization. In his final reflections, Yogananda encourages everyone to seek the divine within and to realize the oneness of all creation, leaving a lasting message of love, spiritual unity, and devotion to God. If you found the summary of Autobiography of a Yogi insightful and valuable, please consider sharing it with others who might benefit from its timeless wisdom. By spreading these teachings, we can help more people discover the path to inner peace, self-realization, and spiritual growth. Just as Paramahansa Yogananda dedicated his life to sharing the universal truths of love, unity, and divine connection, we too can play a part in carrying forward this message of hope and inspiration. Let's help each other grow spiritually by passing on these profound lessons to as many people as possible. Together, we can continue to uplift and inspire the world through the teachings of Yogananda and the deep, transformative power of spirituality.